In this demo, we're going to review Cohesity Cloud Edition deployment. So Cohesity is an all-in-one data protection system, and it's often installed on appliances to protect on-prem resources, but it can also be deployed in the cloud to protect cloud resources. So in this demo, we're going to deploy it in AWS to protect some EC2 instance resources. The first thing that you need to do is either contact Cohesity support or your Cohesity sales team and ensure that they share the required AMIs with you. So as you can see here, there are two Cohesity AMIs. This one right here, which is a control VM, and this is the actual Cohesity node below it. The only thing we'll need to launch is the control VM, and from there, it will launch the Cohesity nodes themselves. So we're going to use a T2 small, which is recommended from Cohesity. I configured a VPC specifically for this. We'll put it on the public subnet just to make connectivity simple. We'll name it. This is the one we used before. And we'll select a security group, which is an important aspect of this. As you can see, there's a rule here that enables all traffic between members of the security group. And that's important because Cohesity is a distributed cluster and the nodes do communicate with each other over IP. So we'll want to make sure that each node has the ability to communicate over several ports required for cluster communication. So we'll go ahead and launch that. We don't need a key pair, so we'll proceed without one. We can connect to it, and what we'll do is deploy a configuration that will allow the Cohesity cluster to be created. So I'm going to connect to it via SSH, and I'm going to use the Cohesity user. Okay, so I'm currently in the home Cohesity directory, and in here there are a couple things. One is a data directory. So in the data directory, there's an AWS directory which has a cluster parameter file. So let's take a look at that. And as you can see, these are the required fields to deploy a cluster. So an access key ID, the secret key, and that's a user that has the authority to deploy instances, among other things. There's a detailed policy that you can deploy in the Cohesity Cloud Edition setup guide. I'm just going to use a user that has full administrator access to keep it simple. Region, zone, cluster name, some IP addresses, and then obviously you have your VPC IDs, subnets, security groups, some DNS, NTP, and domain name information. So just to keep it simple, I'm going to send a configuration file that I've already filled out values for up to the Cohesity control VM. I'm doing that here with this SCP command. And then I'm going to come over to the Cohesity control VM, and I'm just going to make sure that my path contains this software bin directory. That actually has this command, Cohesity AWS setup. And we're not actually going to stop the cluster. We are going to create the cluster. So anything that you do with this command, you can reference this same configuration file for. So once we go ahead and create the cluster, we'll have the ability to stop it, and we'll save on resources. You know, if we're not conducting backups, we can actually shut down the instances, so we're not charged for them. The EBS volumes that back the instances still have to remain in place, so there will be a cost associated with that. But this is one way to make using the Cohesity Cloud Edition cluster a little bit more efficient in terms of AWS costs. So let's go ahead and create that cluster. And as you can see, it's basically generating a CloudFormation stack. So let's go over here and take a look at the progress of the CloudFormation stack. So we have a create complete here, and as you can see, there were multiple instances created, volumes associated with those instances, network interfaces associated with those instances. So as you can see, it's VM1, VM2, and VM3. Cohesity's minimum cluster size is 3 nodes, and that's what we created. So let's go take a look at our instances that have been created. We'll just do a refresh on this. And as you can see, we started off with just 3 instances, and now we have our helper VM and each node in the cluster. And each is tagged with the cluster name. And these are M4 4x larges. So let's go back to our Cohesity control VM. So we saw before that this was creating a CloudFormation stack that created several instances that became part of the cluster. Once those instances were up and running, the cluster create command was issued. This command took the parameters from our JSON file that we uploaded earlier, and then the cluster create process took a little time, but in the end we have a successful cluster creation. So let's just go take a look and verify that that actually happened. We'll come out here and connect to the IP, which I believe that's the one. Username is admin, cluster name is CEO7, and at this point you're presented with an end user license agreement and you're prompted for a license key. So that is Cohesity Cloud Edition. From here you can protect resources in the cloud.